What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, April 3rd edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 10-game MLB slate tonight, a lot of afternoon games. We have some decent slates later in the day as well if you are interested in those. 5-gamer at, I think, like 405 on DraftKings with 10K to first in the flagship. 4-gamer at night, like 25K to first. But the main tournaments are the 10-gamers starting at 105 Eastern. Going to talk about those going through game by game. Obviously, still waiting on some lineups. Some stuff's going to change between now and lock, but I'll go over how my lineups would look if the slate started right now. And more importantly for you guys, just break down every game, talk through matchups, and all of that. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Had planned on being back to do a show yesterday until I looked and saw what a dog shit slate it was. Money aside, I got first for 25K in the main flagship on DraftKings, but it was not a slate that I thought people would have much interest in watching a show for, so I didn't do it. But really good slate today. Should be fun. A lot of good pitching, good offensive spots. First course slate of the year. That's always a disaster, but it seems fun at the start. So going to get into it, going game by game. You can see the Run the Sims projections on the screen. You can sign up for these. Use promo code RTSMLB26 and get 20% off of your first payment. Link is in the description below. The regular price is $100, so if you use that, you're getting it for $80. I've been using these. I said it at the beginning of the year. Normally, I'm somebody that aggregates projections, kind of regardless of the sport, in some form or fashion. But I truly think that we use data in our projections that accounts for all of the things that I really want it to account for, that Yuta factors in and thinks about, that he wanted it to account for. So I've been using this straight, within obviously my own process, but using our projections by themselves, very good start to the year for me. So I obviously not going to guarantee the same results, but I do recommend them. Dale said, do you know when the props tool will go live? No, I'm not sure. Owen, our coder, behind the scenes model builder guy, is working on that. He said he doesn't think it'll be like too long, but that will be, for those of you interested, that will be included as well. It's not going to be an add-on. It's not an additional price. It'll be included in that $100 a month that gets you the DFS projections. So if you are interested in props, obviously hold off on using that promo code until that goes live, but it should be live sooner rather than later. It will directly use the results of our in-house simulations that create our projections. So it's really, I think, a matter of him just coding everything out to work on the site and to just pull lines and get everything functioning. But he shouldn't have to build anything like too new, so I don't think it'll take too long. Min Cash Merchant said took down 20K on Monday with the Giant stack and Gilbert fade. Add me or the man. Yeah, that was one where do as I say, not as I do, I guess, because by the time we got to lock, I think I was like around the field on Gilbert and definitely under the field on the Giants. But when I ran my stuff in the morning, it looked really good. So glad that worked out for somebody. I was pretty annoyed when that all happened. I'm going to get into it here, starting with the Dodgers taking on the Nats. We have a weird total of 0 on the screen here, but it looks like our projections are fine. Ohtani, projected for 12.7, so that doesn't look like an issue. He showed up in a bunch of my lineups. So I think this is just like a cosmetic error and not anything that screwed with projections. It's still there, but whatever. It looks like everything showed up okay for me, I think. So one thing that is interesting about the slate is you do have the Coors game. You have Philly with like a 6+ implied run total in Colorado, but there are other teams that have very high totals as well. Dodgers are one of them. They're around 6 or a little bit higher. Phillies, as I mentioned, are up there. You have Baltimore approaching 5 in Pittsburgh. You have Toronto around 5 in Chicago. A bunch of teams around 4.5 as well. So there are good offenses you can get to other than the Phillies. And starting here with the Dodgers and the Nats, starting with the pitching, Emmett Sheehan's going for the Dodgers. Miles Mikolas is going for the Nats. Mikolas, 6K, absolutely brutal matchup against the Dodgers. I really don't see much reason to get to him. He's projected for like 1% ownership. There's 20 pitchers on the slate. The fact that he's 6K doesn't really do a lot for me. So not really interested in Michaelis. Sheehan on the other side is very interesting. He's projected for about 20% ownership right now. I have 26%. The pro case, the bull case for Emmett Sheehan is that he's filthy. He's a very good strikeout pitcher. We saw that last year. We've seen it. We saw him rack up strikeouts at the beginning of his first start of the year against, I believe it was Arizona. Overall, last season as a starter, he struck out 31.6% of hitters, had a 3.02 xFIP. The weird thing with Emmett Sheehan that I really don't know what to do with it is during spring training, we saw that it's normal for a pitcher to struggle, their second time through the order or third time through the order. That's just a function of, they're getting deeper into the game. Hitters are seeing them more often. They're sequencing maybe the same sequencing or suboptimal sequencing, to switch things up second or third time through. That's all normal. But we saw big velo drops for Emmett Sheehan right around the fourth or fifth inning in the preseason or in spring training rather. And then we saw it again against the Diamondbacks. I think it was in the third or the fourth inning. Suddenly he went from throwing, 95, 96 to 93. Probably not coincidentally, the Diamondbacks got to him the second time through the order. So I don't know what to make of it because on the one hand, it's not normal. On the other hand, I'm sure the Dodgers are aware of it, and it's probably some sort of mechanical thing. I doubt it's an injury thing because we've seen it a few starts in a row, and the Dodgers keep running him out there, which they wouldn't if he was hurt, I don't think. So more likely than not, I think it just goes away sooner than later, and this is a really, really talented $7,300 pitcher in a pretty solid matchup against the Nats. Young offense. They have been solid so far this year, but they're not the scariest offense in the world. They have a sub-4 implied run total. Overall, I think this is a good spot, especially at the price for Emmett Sheehan. But I did want to point out that there's kind of that just really difficult to quantify thing. I've talked about with our projections that we will be quick to be able to adjust for things like changes in stuff or changes in velo compared to baselines. But this is even more weird than that because it's not like Sheehan is just coming out there throwing 4 miles an hour slower than he did last year consistently. It's just he loses his legs or something halfway through the start. So there is some extra volatility here, but I think the big thing is that he is only 7,300. He is certainly a more talented pitcher than that when he's right. I'm getting to 26% right now. Fields at 20. I think he looks pretty good, but I did want to, just kind of mention the added weird stuff around Emmett Sheehan. For the offenses here, obviously the Dodger side is going to be the more appealing in terms of their chances of success. Shohei Ohtani projected for 38% ownership. I got the 32%. You can still play him at first base and outfield for God knows what reason. The guy does not play defense and somehow has multi-position eligibility, but whatever, it lets you get Shohei into your lineups more. That's fun. Maybe it's just DraftKings making up for the fact that we still can't use him as a hitter on days that he pitches, but he's easy to get into lineups. I think, clearly he's good in stacks. He's great as a one-off. It doesn't really matter. So I have a lot of him. Outside of that, I'm actually not getting to a ton of the Dodgers here. They are relatively expensive. They're not super expensive, but you have Ohtani north of 6K. You have Tucker north of 5K, and then a bunch of guys in the mid 4s. So as a stack, it can kind of add up. They're not getting a massive amount of ownership, but you have around 14% coming into Tucker, to Betts, 13 to Muncy, 12 to Smith and Freeman. I'm a bit below that. I have 8% Tucker, 5 to 6% on Mookie, Muncy, Smith, 4% on Freeland and Freeman. So I am a bit below the field. I still have the Dodgers, just not quite as much as the field does. Ohtani far and away my highest owned Dodger bat, along with the projected field's highest owned Dodger bat. On the Nat side, not a whole lot there for me either. Obviously, it's a tough matchup against Sheehan. You could make the argument of, Sheehan is going to be relatively popular. Maybe he does drop off again the second time through the order. And you're not getting much ownership coming into the Nats. About 6% to Luis Garcia, 5% to James Wood. It goes down from there. I have 8% apiece on Wood and Garcia. Wood, speaking of guys who really knows, that are obviously talented, but who really knows exactly what they are. I mean, this guy was unbelievably good the first half of last season, fell off of a cliff in the second half, which isn't totally unusual as the league adjusts to a young player. We haven't seen, tons of success so far this year or in spring training, but he has tons of power. He has speed. Like, he's obviously a high upside guy at the very least at low ownership. So I have 8% of him and Garcia, 7% of Jacob Young, 5% of Dalen Lyle, who's been very impressive since coming up last season. So not a team that I have a lot of, but I am a little bit over the field on guys like James Wood and Luis Garcia. Cardinals taking on the Tigers in Detroit, about a 4.5 total for the Tigers, about a 3.5 total for the Cardinals. For St. Louis, we have Michael McGreevy at $7,200, only getting about 2% ownership. For the Tigers, we have Framber Valdez at $8,900, getting about 9% ownership. He was at 12 when I initially ran stuff, so ownership has come down a little bit. Maybe I'd get to a little bit more when I rerun everything. But for right now, I'm not getting to the pitching here. I have 2% of Valdez. I don't have McGreevy. It's not a good matchup for McGreevy against the Tigers. It is a solid matchup for Valdez against the Cardinals, but he is relatively expensive. You do have, we already talked about Emmett Sheehan for $1,300 less. You have other, solid pitching options on the slate. So far this season, the Cardinals, obviously in a limited sample, have a 21.8% strikeout percentage. Going back to the start of last season, their active roster against left-handed pitching ranks 10th with a 23% strikeout percentage. So it is, all in all, a solid spot for Valdez. The Cardinals offense shouldn't be very good overall, but if you want to play Valdez, I think it's fine. There's just other spots that I'm prioritizing a little bit more. Obviously, he's a very good pitcher, very good at getting ground balls. Going back to last season, has a strikeout percentage of 23.2%, 3.34 xFIP. Good pitcher, just not one that I currently am prioritizing. For the bats here, and this does kind of go hand in hand with me not having a lot of Valdez, I am getting to a very healthy amount of the Cardinals, which I do not particularly like, but they are very, very cheap and relatively low owned. And then you do get, a little bit of negative correlation against a 10% owned pitcher or so in Valdez. This is certainly a spot that I hope, as more lineups come out and ownership updates and I rerun everything, I get to a little bit less. But right now I'm getting to a pretty healthy amount of the Cardinals. Victor Scott, not getting any ownership, batting ninth, gives you massive stolen base upside if he gets on, which is, obviously a big if, but I'm getting there. I'm about 2x the field on Herrera, $3,500 catcher, batting second. Like, there is power upside there. He has power, even though the matchup isn't good. So I don't hate that at 9% ownership. I have 16% Ramon Urias at 2,300, batting cleanup, second base, third base eligible, batting cleanup. He's like a league average hitter for his career, going back to his time with the Orioles. So he's underpriced and he's batting in the middle of the order. Like, the matchup sucks, but he's not getting much ownership, so I don't hate it. Valdez doesn't give up a lot of power. It's not a good matchup. 135 expected ISO to right-handed hitters since last season. I have 10% Burleson, 9% Wynn, 8% Walker. So they're a cheap, low-owned stack. They're not one that I have any confidence in, but they are one that just happens to be showing up right now in my lineups, probably in part because of what else it allows me to get as well. On the Tigers side against McGreevy, Kevin McGonigal leading the way with 14% projected ownership as a $4,200 third baseman and shortstop. He is one of the top hitting prospects in baseball. He already looks very, very good and comfortable at the major league level. He's my highest owned Tiger at 9%, so a little below the field, but still looks good. He's batting leadoff, which is nice. Other than that, you're getting like 5 to 10% ownership on most of the Tigers. I'm in like the 5%, range on most of them. Torres, Green, Carpenter in particular. Do keep in mind, and this should be showing up. Yeah, you can see it here. We talked about, they didn't really come through, but the last time I did a show, we talked about the Tigers in Arizona and the Diamondbacks not having any left-handed relievers, and that being really, really useful for stacking the Tigers because they have so many platoon bats, so many left-handed bats that are good that end up getting pinch hit for. That's not the case here. The Cardinals do have two relievers, Justin Brule and Jojo Romero. Romero is a back-end guy, so he's a little bit less concerning. Like, if the Tigers get off to a good start against McGreevy, you're probably just not going to see Jojo Romero in this game unless, the Cardinals offense keeps it close. So it's not, they kind of like, for the purposes of stacking, they kind of have one lefty, but it does still increase the pinch hit percentage for some of these guys. Kerry Carpenter in particular, you can see the 17% pinch hit percentage here for him. McKinstry at 17%, Meadows at 22%. Those are all guys that do carry pretty significant pinch hit risk. And I've mentioned this before, but those numbers are not static, over the last 160 games or whatever. Like, this is how often Carpenter got pinch hit for. They are directly out of our play-by-play sim that accounts for opposing bullpen, what reliever is coming in different situations. So it is a dynamic number where, Kerry Carpenter had like a 6% chance of getting pinch hit for. When I did the show the other day against Arizona, it's 17% here. So you can see that, and that is obviously reflected in projections and something that, you should keep in mind when you're deciding on your stacks. Miami taking on the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. Nice park upgrade for the Marlins, who are off to a very good start so far this season. Yuri Perez pitching for Miami in a very dangerous matchup. $8,100 price tag, projected for 17% ownership right now. That seems like surprising when I first look at it, but he's also showing up for me. He projects pretty well at 8,100. So I wasn't really prepared to say that I like Yuri Perez here against the Yankees, but I do get it. He is a good pitcher. He has good strikeout stuff. The Yankees lineup is obviously dangerous, but they do have strikeouts in it as well. 27.5% strikeout percentage going back to last season for Yuri Perez. So far this season, the Yankees rank 10th in strikeout percentage at 26.9%. Since the start of last season against right-handed pitching, their active roster ranks 6th with a 23.8% strikeout percentage, also a 121 WRC plus. Absolute definition of a boom or bust spot. Somebody said it might be the wrong mic. Yeah, good call. All right, that should be better. Thanks for letting me know. So yeah, boom bust spot for Perez. I think the ceiling is certainly there at 8,100. Good strikeout stuff, plenty of strikeouts in the lineup. Also just a shitty park to pitch in, and you're facing a lineup that has a lot of really, really good hitters. It's not like you're getting a watered down lineup here, for the day game or anything. Grisham, Judge, Bellinger, Rice, Stanton, Jazz, Wells, 1 through 7. Obviously very dangerous, but also a lot of strikeouts. On the other side, Will Warren going for the Yankees against Miami, 7,700, getting about 7% ownership. I have like 3%. He projects fine for the salary. That said, I do, as already mentioned, prefer Emmett Sheehan. He projected better. Perez projects better, at $400 more. There's just a bunch of pitching on the slate. Warren is a solid enough pitcher overall. 23.8% strikeout percentage, 3.92 xFIP last season. If I remember correctly, he had really drastic strikeout splits. 28.5% K percentage against righties last season, 20% against lefties, 150 expected ISO against righties, 189 against lefties. Miami's lineup was not out when I ran my stuff, but it is out now, and it is very left-handed heavy. Not to say these are, the most dangerous left-handed hitters top to bottom, but they do have 6 lefties in there. Marcy, Edwards, 1-2. Hicks batting cleanup is left-handed. Cassie batting 6th is left-handed, and then Conine and Pauly 8-9 are left-handed. So you do have a pitcher in Yankee Stadium that is susceptible to left-handed power facing left-handed hitters, but at the same time you have like a 3.5 total for Miami. I think if you wanted to maybe if you're scared off a little bit by what I was saying about Emmett Sheehan, and you wanted to pivot some of that ownership to Will Warren, fine. It's not a bad matchup for him, and he is a pretty good pitcher overall. For the bats here, Yankee Stadium, good park to hit in. Starting on the Miami side, I'm not really getting there. Wouldn't mind it, just given, again, that Warren does give up some power to lefties, and you are getting a left-handed heavy Miami lineup. Quick look at the Yankees bullpen. They have 3 lefties in it, so that's a problem and a reason that you could certainly make to shy away from Miami bats. And you can see relatively high pinch hit risks here as well. 34% on Graham Pauly and on Griffin Conine down at the bottom of the order. Liam Hicks, 16%. Owen Cassie, 10%. So that is probably one thing that's holding me back on Miami, is that the Yankees have basically unlimited ability to match up with guys once Will Warren gets out of the game. So that is a pretty big negative. 3% Xavier Edwards is my highest owned Miami bat right now.
On the Yankees side, I was hoping that I'd be getting to them, given that I am playing like 22% Eury Perez right now. Eury Perez is relatively popular at, 16, 17% ownership. This is, to me, if you're playing a lot of lineups, the perfect spot to just be on both sides, because you have tons of Yankees power, you have tons of Perez strikeout upside, and everything is, relatively affordable. So there's a pretty good chance that either Perez has a really good game for 8,100 or several Yankees have, hit home runs, because that's what they do. So Aaron Judge getting 11% ownership is the highest owned Yankee bat right now. I'm getting to 12% of him. Trent Grisham's getting 8%. I have 11. Rice is getting 4. I have 9. Jazz is getting 6. I have 9. Wells is getting 3. I have 6. So I'm roughly, even to 2x the field on the Yankees individually. Perfectly fine spot to be in. Since the start of last season, Perez has allowed a 190 expected ISO to righties, or to lefties rather, 146 to righties. It is a park downgrade for him in New York. You do have a healthy 4.5 total for the Yankees. He does also have a 28% K percentage against lefties. So again, like, he is different from Will Warren in the sense that he will still strike out opposite-handed hitters. He just gives up power. So I'm happy being on both sides of it. Plenty of upside on both sides. If you're somebody, playing single entry 3 max, I think obviously there's a tendency, like, it can be frustrating to watch a show and be like, oh, well, I'm just playing both sides. If you're a single entry player, 3 max player, you kind of can just pick whichever side you want, and you're going to have plenty of like really good lineups that you can make. Should be the takeaway there. It's not like, oh, I'm covering all my bases, I'm just playing both sides of every game. It's like, yeah, I think there's a lot of really good Yankee stacks you can make. I think there's a lot of good lineups that have Eury Perez. So if you would rather play the Yankees, I'm sure you can find good lineups there. If you'd rather play Eury Perez, I'm sure you can find good lineups with Perez. It's kind of the takeaway, and really it probably doesn't matter much. Just pick one and roll with it. Toronto taking on the White Sox in Chicago, about a 3 to 3.5 total for the White Sox. Blue Jays coming in around 5. Dylan Cease pitching for Toronto. Grant Taylor going for the White Sox. Taylor is 4K flat. He's getting 1% ownership. I am not even going to lie to you. I have never seen this name in my life, which is not overly surprising for a White Sox pitcher. So I am pulling up his Fangraphs page right now. He pitches for the White Sox, so I assume he's not particularly good. At the very least, he's probably like talented, but not ready for the majors. Did make his debut last year. 2 starts, 36 appearances out of the bullpen, 36 innings pitched. Struck out a bunch of dudes last year, but again, mostly out of the bullpen. Was pretty nasty though. 1.42 FIP, 2.34 xFIP. Struck out 34% of hitters. He's gone 1 inning. He's gone 2 innings this year in 2 appearances. So not somebody you should be expecting to go deep into the game. Obviously, a tough strikeout matchup as well. We have him projected to face like 9 batters here. So we have him with a really good projection for somebody facing 9 batters, but not anybody that I think you're looking to play on a 10-game slate. On the other side, obviously, Dylan Cease is going to get a lot of ownership, as he should. 35% projected ownership for Cease. He is my highest owned pitcher on the slate. I have like 65% right now. 9,900, I think, is a very reasonable price tag, given that there's plenty of spots that you can save money, whether it's SP2, whether it's with cheap stacks, whatever it may be. Going back to last season for Cease, he has a 30.5% strikeout percentage, 3.47 xFIP. Very, very good pitcher. That goes without saying. In my opinion, the best free agent pitcher that was available this year. So far, or since the start of last season, rather, against right-handed pitching, the White Sox were a middle-of-the-road strikeout matchup. Their active roster, 21% strikeout percentage on average. So far this season, they are striking out at the second highest rate in baseball at 34%. And I had mentioned this on a previous show. They're a weird team to look at their like average strikeout percentage, because you have a few guys in the lineup that are like sub 20% and will pull down that average. Chase Mydroth, I believe, being one of them, Benintendi being one. But like Murakami has obviously hit for power so far, but he projects as like a mid 30% strikeout guy. Colson Montgomery, same thing, hits for power, 30+% strikeout guy. Hayes is like a mid-20s guy. So there are, not that they're free strikeouts, like they're capable of hitting, but the White Sox are a team where like you would much rather you can have a team that has, like a 22% average strikeout percentage and like everybody in the lineup just strikes out like 22% of the time. Or you can have a team where it's 22% and it's, you have Luis Arraez and like 8 guys that strike out 28% of the time. I'd rather have the one that has the high K guys that you can like strike out more than once pretty easily. So I do think that's kind of what happens with the White Sox, and that number from last season is a little bit misleading. So all in all, really, really like Cease here. Not a hot take. Everybody is probably on board with that. I don't think there will be much pushback. Looking at the bats here, not the most appealing spot, going up against an opener who is nasty in Grant Taylor, and then, getting a bullpen game. That said, you do have a Blue Jays offense that is good. They have good hitters. They're not getting a lot of ownership. Did not have their lineup when I built. We still, I don't think, have their lineup, but I was getting to 10% Jimenez at no ownership, 9% Springer, 8% Clement, 5% Kirk, goes down from there. I think it's just as simple as like, they do have a relatively high total. They're not getting a lot of ownership. They are a good offense. If you want to play them, fine. But it's not like you're looking at this matchup and saying, oh yeah, I love a matchup where the first at bat that my guys get is going to be against a guy who has been unhittable essentially in the major leagues. And then every at bat they get the rest of the game is going to probably be against a different arm. Maybe they'll face somebody twice. It's not a great spot, but it's still just it's the White Sox. If things go wrong, like they can go really wrong in a hurry. The Blue Jays obviously can still just throw a bunch of runs on the board. But Cease is clearly the big priority for me from Toronto. On the White Sox side, you can make the case for, leveraging against Cease's ownership. I'm not doing it too much. I have 5% Benintendi and Montgomery and Hayes, and then it just goes down from there. So there are pieces, you can mix in. If you have, let's say you have an expensive stack and you need to save salary somewhere and you don't have Dylan Cease, like why not throw in, Colson Montgomery or Murakami or whatever, but clearly not a team that is likely to succeed, not a high priority team. Cincinnati taking on the Rangers in Texas. For the Reds, Brady Singer going at $7,600. For the Rangers, we have Mackenzie Gore at $8,800. Gore projected for 31% ownership. Singer projected for 3%. I got the 21% Gore. I got the 3% on Singer. Mackenzie Gore, in part, will, I think, depend on exactly what you're doing with Dylan Cease. If I'm going to play 65% Dylan Cease, it makes it a little bit harder to play a bunch of Mackenzie Gore also, because that's, allocating a pretty healthy amount of salary to your 2 pitching options. But if you were to cut back Dylan Cease a bit, play more Mackenzie Gore, that's obviously perfectly fine. Gore is a good pitcher, not on the same level, I don't think, as Dylan Cease, but we've certainly seen the upside from Gore both this season early on and last season. Overall, since last season, 27.5% strikeout percentage, 3.79 xFIP, 1.09 home runs per 9 is actually identical to Cease. And then one thing I had mentioned before also is that we don't have a Reds lineup yet, I don't think. And it will probably be almost all right-handed. But one thing that is nice about left-handed pitchers against the Reds is that it does turn Elly De La Cruz around. And Elly De La Cruz is just a flat-out dog shit hitter from the right side so far in his career. Maybe that changes. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe he just stops hitting right-handed at some point. But so far, like, the dude it's not like, oh, he's worse right-handed. He has like a 65 WRC plus or something in his career against left-handed pitching. So it is nice to, turn him around, but you will still get most likely a very right-handed lineup for Cincinnati. There will be plenty of right-handed power in it. Gore has a 26% K percentage against righties since last year, 171 expected ISO. He gives up some power, but nothing crazy. He gets strikeouts against righties. So it's, not a safe spot, but still a pretty good spot for Mackenzie Gore. Singer just doesn't seem super necessary on this slate. 4.5 total for the Rangers. Not a very good strikeout pitcher. More expensive than Emmett Sheehan. Has one of the lower strikeout percentages on the slate at 22.8%, 4.25 xFIP, or sorry, I guess I should say like middle of the road strikeout rate. He's just kind of a guy. There's going to be plenty of slates where Singer is kind of interesting. 10 gamer against the Rangers, probably not it. For the bats, starting on the Cincinnati side, I do think they're another team where like you don't need to get a lot of them to have a little bit of a stand on the field, get some negative leverage against Mackenzie Gore. I have 9% Sal Stewart. Big-time hitting prospect, one of the Rookie of the Year favorites in the National League. Off to a nice start, I believe, so far this season. I'm pretty sure I've seen stuff about him just hitting balls really hard and all of that. So I am, he's getting 4% ownership. I have 9. Same thing for Matt McClain. I have 8% Ke'Bryan Hayes, who sucks at hitting, but he's 2,500. Certainly somebody that you can include to save salary in your stacks or something. I have 8% De La Cruz. I mentioned him not being good at all against left-handed pitching, but he still has a ton of power overall. He still has massive speed. Like if he just somehow manages to get on first base, he can, steal second, steal third. It doesn't matter how bad he is at hitting against lefties. And then once you get Gore out of the game, decent chance that you're getting De La Cruz against righties from there on out. Anyway, the Rangers bullpen has 3 lefties, so like they'll look to turn De La Cruz around, but he will benefit in that he's protected by righties, and you have the 3 batter rule. Like if you bring a lefty in to face De La Cruz with nobody out, that lefty then has to also face Sal Stewart, Eugenio Suarez, potentially Spencer Steer. So it does protect him a bit. Where he would still very likely get turned around is like, let's say he comes up in a big spot with 2 outs. Then the Rangers just say, all right, we're bringing a lefty in. If he doesn't get De La Cruz out, we'll worry about it then, but we need to get De La Cruz out. Like he'll get turned around in that situation. But the fact that it is a right-handed heavy lineup will get him batting from the left side against the bullpen more often than not, which is obviously good. TJ Friedel, Spencer Steer, Suarez all showing up around 2x the field, which again means like 4 or 5%. There is power upside here. It is just obviously not a particularly good matchup against Gore either. On the Texas side, 5 to 10% ownership coming into most of them against Singer, who, as I mentioned before, just kind of a guy. He's not somebody that, I love taking hitters against. He's not somebody that I love rostering. And I'm pretty much around the field, both on him and on the Rangers. I have 9% Seager. I have 7% Nimmo. Those are my 2 highest owned guys, followed by 5% apiece on Peterson and Smith. 122 expected ISO to righties since the start of last season. Lefties have done damage in terms of production. 341 expected WOBA, 203 expected ISO. He has struck them out 25% of the time compared to 20% for righties. So you see like a weird split here where his strikeout ability increases, but his ability to limit hard contact and damage also decreases. So certainly getting to the left-handed bats here is pretty appealing from an upside standpoint. The Reds bullpen has 2 left-handed relievers in it. They should both be available today. They didn't play yesterday, as most teams did not. So you do have to deal with that later on in the game. Not really an issue for Seager. He's not really a pinch hit risk. He hits left-handed pitching fine. You don't really expect him to pinch hit for Nimmo. Jock Peterson and Josh Smith are the 2 that I think you worry about the most when it comes to pinch hitting later in the game. So do keep that in mind. But Seager and Nimmo in particular, I like the most from Texas. Cubs taking on the Guardians in Cleveland, about a 4 total for the Guardians, about 4 to 4.5 for the Cubs. This is another one where we have a display issue, it looks like, but I don't think it's affecting the projections. Joey Cantillo going for the Guardians at 6,800. Cade Horton going for the Cubs at 8K. 2% ownership coming into Horton, 8% coming in to Cantillo. I am getting to 2% Cantillo, 1% Horton. I don't really have much of either one. The matchup for Cantillo is not particularly good. Both of these guys do have solid strikeout stuff. Or actually, Horton only struck out 20% last year. I thought it was higher going off the top of my head. And then Cantillo as a starter did strike out 26%, but he also walked 10.5% of hitters. Tells you he generally throws a lot of pitches, 3.82 xFIP. So I think how deep into the game he goes is probably a concern. You can see we have him projected for about 5 innings. Same for Horton. Price tag is fine. Matchup against the Cubs sucks. So I'm not really getting to either of these guys, but I do think, especially again, if like you're scared off of Sheehan a little bit, Cantillo is at least a viable option for saving salary. For the bats here, starting with the Cubs, another team that I just kind of don't have much of, and neither does the field. They're always a high upside team. They steal bases. They have power. That being said, Matt Shaw, 5%, Nico Horner, 4%. They are my 2 highest owned guys. Blake said that I missed San Diego, Boston, or was it skipped? Nope, I skipped it by accident. I will go back to it. Thanks for that. 3% Carson Kelly, 3% PCA. The Cubs are kind of like, different spot, different situation, but kind of, I think about them the same way I think about like the Blue Jays, where it's just like, there's nothing I can really say about the spot that I love, but like they just have a lot of good low-owned players. They're fine. Cantillo, 147 expected ISO with a 28% K percentage against righties since last year. Nothing to really pick on there. 25% K percentage against lefties, 132 expected ISO. On the Guardian side, going back to last season, Horton, 195 expected ISO to right-handed hitters, 140 to lefties. So you do have some reverse splits in terms of inability to limit production or power, at least, to righties compared to lefties. The expected WOBA to both sides is almost the same, 304 to lefties, 308 to righties. And then the strikeout percentage against righties is higher. So mostly I would view him as like neutral. I just, if there's a right-handed hitter on the Guardians that you really wanted to play, I wouldn't like shy away from it, but they also don't really have right-handed hitters that I would ever want to play outside of sometimes Rhys Hoskins. So I don't think it matters too much here. Jose Ramirez is in 3% of my lineups. That's my highest owned Guardian. He's getting 4% ownership. That is the highest of anybody on the Guardians. This is mostly just a game that I'm not particularly interested in. Going back to the Padres and the Red Sox, because I just skipped right over that one before. Sonny Gray pitching for the Red Sox, Michael King going for the Padres. These are both good pitchers that don't look like massive priorities on today's slate, but they're both certainly good. 8,500 for Sonny Gray, reasonable price tag. 8,200 for King, reasonable price tag. 10% ownership to King, 9 to Gray. I have 15% on King. I have 9 on Gray. So I'm pretty much right around the field on these guys. Neither matchup is ideal. Both pitchers are good, but like when you have a slate where, Dylan Cease he's more, but it's not really hard to find the salary, and he's facing the White Sox, or, even though I'm not personally getting to him much right now, you have Framber Valdez at a similar salary facing the Cardinals. You have other pitchers that are you have Mackenzie Gore at a similar salary facing the Reds. There's just other spots where I think people are going to look, and I think that's fine. But I am, right around the field on both of these guys. Since last season, King has a 25% strikeout percentage, 4.25 xFIP, has struggled with power, 1.38 home runs allowed per 9 innings, but the strikeout stuff is there. Gray, 26.6% strikeout percentage, 3.05 xFIP. But again, neither of these offenses are ideal matchups either. The Padres are a very difficult team to strike out. Last year, they were, I believe, the most difficult team to strike out against right-handed pitching. Oh, sorry, they were 24th, 20.2% strikeout percentage against righties last season. So far this year, middle of the pack. They ranked 16th overall, 23.8% K percentage, but they do have low K guys in their lineup. One big difference that does increase the strikeout percentage of their active roster, and I think this is why it's a little bit higher than I was thinking from last year. Luis Arraez is no longer on the Padres. He is on the Giants now. So now you have like a bunch of 18, 19% strikeout guys, whereas last year you had a bunch of 18, 19% strikeout guys and a 7% strikeout guy. The 7% guy is gone. You do get some strikeouts towards the bottom with Gavin Sheets, with Campusano. Laureano will strike out a bit, but Bogarts, Merrill, Machado, and Andujar in particular, low K guys in the middle of this order. So that, does hurt Sonny Gray a little bit, but he is still a good pitcher. Also, the game being in Fenway, like this is a good park for offense. And then on the other side for King, a little bit cheaper, but still certainly a difficult lineup, dangerous lineup. Anthony, Story, Duran, Contreras, Abreu, 1 through 5. Bottom of the order drops off a little bit for the Red Sox. But I do right now, at least when I ran stuff, give a slight edge to Michael King, but I think both these pitchers are very, very similar. Dangerous spot, both in terms of opponent and ballpark, but good pitchers as well. And it is a spot, you can keep in mind that there's just going to be a little bit more volatility because of the matchup. Like the median projection isn't super appealing for either of these guys, but you're relatively likely to just get a polarized outcome in a single baseball game where either Michael King really has it and he just strikes out 8 Red Sox in 6 innings, or Michael King doesn't have it and he scores, 5 fantasy points and gets lit up, or vice versa with Sonny Gray. It's not like this is the 15 fantasy point projection is, if you simulate this game 10,000 times or whatever, that's where they land. But this is a good example of when you get a good pitcher against a good offense, you kind of get like a muted projection on all parts. But from a tournament standpoint, all parts still have really high ceilings because both pitchers have very good strikeout stuff. Both offenses have the ability to put up a bunch of runs. And very often you're going to get kind of one of those quadrants where like a pitcher dominates or the offense does really well, it's not always just going to be, 5-4, 5 strikeouts for everybody. Like there can be some very polarized outcomes based on the talent here. For the offenses, for San Diego against Sonny Gray, this is another team getting no ownership, like 2-3% ownership across the board. I'm not that much higher than that, but I have 8% Machado, I have 7% Tatis, 4% Merrill. Clearly those are the names that you're going to be looking to first if you decide that you want to go to the Padres. Since the start of last season, Sonny Gray, 183 expected ISO to righties, 161 to lefties. So a little bit more power allowed to righties, 24% K percentage to righties, 29.5% to lefties. So higher strikeout percentage against lefties. Very good curveball that he utilizes against left-handed hitters. Makes him a little bit of a reverse splits guy. Again, not that I'm opposed to playing Jackson Merrill, but you shouldn't, if you're on the fence about like Manny Machado or Fernando Tatis, you shouldn't think like, oh, righty, this is a bad spot necessarily. Like, it's not a good spot. Sonny Gray is good, but he's not somebody that is like particularly lights out against same-handed hitters compared to opposite-handed hitters. For Boston against Michael King, this is a team that I would actually kind of like to have a little bit more of. I'm right around the field, slightly over on some guys, but you take a home run prone pitcher in Michael King, you put him into Fenway Park, that does have the potential to be a pretty high scoring situation for Boston. That being said, Trevor Story at 6% is my highest owned guy. 4,100, batting second at shortstop. That looks pretty good. Roman Anthony's in 5% of my lineups, and then it just gets less from there. But I think if I had to pick, even though I think the pitchers are very comparable, if I had to choose a side of this game, I think, at least in my head, I would lean towards the Red Sox. Steven Leibowitz mentioned not good hitting weather in Boston. That is something factored into our projections as well. So maybe that's why the pitching is projecting a little bit better and the hitting isn't projecting quite as good as I thought it would. It looks like it's like 60 degrees or so in Fenway. So that's not ideal. Now getting to Coors Field, Phillies taking on the Rockies. About a 4 total for the Rockies, about 6 for the Phillies. Aaron Nola pitching for Philadelphia at $8,600, getting 15% ownership. Michael Lorenzen, $6,600, getting no ownership, deservedly so, for the Rockies. I'm getting the 14% Nola, so I'm right in line with the field there. Pitching in Coors Field sucks. Aaron Nola is good, but not as good as he was, earlier in his career. But the Rockies also suck. Aaron Nola is still a solid pitcher. The price tag is reasonable at $8,600. There's a handful of pitchers in this price range where it's just like, yeah, the spot's not safe for one reason or another, whether it's the opponent, the ballpark, both. But the price tag's a little bit cheap. The Rockies have tons of strikeouts in their lineup. They have tons of hitters that at best are, projects at the major league level and maybe eventually end up being good, but certainly are not very good right now. So getting to that, 15% mark on Nola, I think is fine. I don't have any interest in Lorenzen. I really don't know why anyone would. For the Phillies bats, 15 to 20% ownership to most of Philadelphia. I am mostly below the field here, and it has obviously nothing to do with like some secret reason I think the Phillies are not going to score runs. Michael Lorenzen is a guy, like he's fine. He's whatever. He's not particularly good. On the scale of Rockies pitchers, he's pretty good. 178 expected ISO to lefties since last year, 202 to righties, about a 21% strikeout percentage. He's not a gas can, but he's certainly not a pitcher that you shy away from. The Rockies bullpen generally, especially if they're playing from behind, if they're getting beat, the weaker end of their bullpen isn't particularly good. It's mostly just an ownership thing here where I can get exposure to like so many of these offenses that I've mentioned that are getting like 2-3% aggregate ownership, and I can get to them, in 8% of my lineups. And it costs me giving up Philadelphia, which is okay. Elron said, why do I only get player 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah in the opto and generating lineups? It's a bug that we need to fix. Just refresh it and it should fix itself. But yeah, we're aware of it. We're working on it. So for Philadelphia right now, you're getting like 21% ownership to Schwarber, 24 to Stott, 15 to 20 to Turner, Baum, Garcia, Harper, Marsh, Real Muto. It's just a popular stack, and it should be. It's not, the ownership isn't egregious. I think that you very easily could say like, hey, I want to be overweight on the Phillies, and then just, mix in some more of the contrarian pitching, mix in some more of that like Will Warren or I don't know who else did we mention that was like relatively low owned, Cantillo or Horton, guys like that at least they still have some upside. They're relatively low owned. Mix them in with the Phillies, you're perfectly fine. Mix in, a secondary stack with like the White Sox or the Cardinals or Miami, low owned teams that nobody's going to get to, and you're perfectly fine. Like you can still make profitable lineups with the Phillies, but for me right now, at least, they are a team that I am a bit under the field on. I have 17% Schwarber as the high mark, 8% Stott, 5% on Turner, Baum, Garcia, Harper. So if the Phillies go off, it probably won't be a good day for me, but there's 19 other offenses on the slate, and a lot of them are in good enough spots that I personally prefer getting to them at 1/5 of the ownership to the Phillies guys. Colorado is actually one of those offenses, sort of. I don't love the matchup against Nola, obviously, but like I said before, he's not as good a pitcher as he was earlier in his career. He's always been somebody that's better at home as well, for whatever reason. Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia is historically a hitter-friendly park, but Nola has historically been better there. Going back to last year, overall, 24.5% strikeout percentage, 3.69 xFIP, has allowed 1.81 home runs per 9, is a curveball heavy guy, which is a pitch that doesn't play as well in Coors Field as it does in non-altitude places, and is getting some ownership. So I think anytime that you're getting a pitcher in Coors Field that's like 15% owned, there's merit, especially when the Rockies themselves are not very popular, to just getting to the other side of it. You have 8% ownership coming into McCarthy, 11% to Goodman, 10% to Castro, 5-6% or less to everyone else. The same three guys that are getting the ownership are the same three that are showing up the most for me. I have like 16 to 19% apiece on Jake McCarthy, Hunter Goodman, Willie Castro. We do not have a Rockies lineup yet. We do not have a Rockies lineup yet, but assuming McCarthy's leading off, Castro's hitting third, Goodman's hitting second, like you're getting the top of the order. They're very cheap, 2,900 for McCarthy, 41 for Goodman, who does have power. Castro, 2,900. Second base outfield is useful. He's somebody that he didn't have a good year offensively last year, but he has had good years in the past with Minnesota. He will steal bases occasionally as well. He's a switch hitter that can play multiple positions. You don't have too much pinch hit risk for him. You do have substantial pinch hit risk for McCarthy. Once, later in the game, you have substantial pinch hit risk for Johnston and Julian and Rumfield, but Castro doesn't really have it. Goodman doesn't have it. So those are the guys I like the most. Tovar getting 6%, which is in line with the field at shortstop. And then it's like 5% or less of everybody else. So I think mostly I'm probably using the Rockies as like 2-man stacks, 3-man stacks with higher projected, higher probability offenses. Tampa Bay facing Minnesota in Minnesota. Both of these teams have an implied run total around 4. Joe Boyle is on the mound for the Rays. For Minnesota, we have Bailey Ober, $6,700 price tag on Ober, getting 3% ownership, $7K price tag on Boyle, getting 12%. I'm getting to 6% on Boyle. I think the price tag is fine. He's got nasty stuff. Can strike guys out when he's throwing strikes. 26% strikeout percentage as a starter going back to last season. Also has a 12% walk percentage, 4.26 xFIP. It's very easy for his pitch count to get elevated just as a function of going deep in counts, getting strikeouts, walking guys. But when he's locating, working ahead in counts, he is very, very difficult to hit. And that cheap salary does, I think, undersell his upside a little bit. But I am half the field on him, probably in part because I'm over the field on Sheehan at a similar price. For Bailey Ober, I don't have him. He's not getting much ownership. He's an okay pitcher, but the Rays are a solid offensive team, it seems. They're off to a nice start this year. 21st in strikeout percentage, 117 WRC plus. Obviously, 1 week or 8 days into the season, small sample size, but nice start for them. But the more important thing is just, Bailey Ober going back to last year, 18.9% K percentage, 4.76 xFIP, 1.86 home runs allowed per 9 innings. Just not somebody that I'm super interested in rostering on a slate where I have a million pitching options. I can stack a ton of different offenses that are 5% owned. I don't need to go that far off the board at pitcher if I don't want to. For the bats on the Tampa side against Ober, not much ownership here. I'm not getting to them either. Yandy Diaz, 3% ownership for me, 4% for the field at 4,700. He's been crushing the ball to start the season. But, first base, third base, there's plenty of options in general. But I do think that you can make a strong case just looking at numbers for Yandy Diaz. 236 expected ISO allowed by Ober since last season, 21.5% strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters. The weather in Minnesota is actually warm. It looks like it's in the 80s. Nope, that is Texas. I looked at the wrong game. It's like 40 degrees in Minnesota. The weather is shit. So that is why this total is so low. It looks like a game that we actually do need to keep an eye on. Right now, I think it's probably okay, but really, really, really shitty weather. So that's the big reason I think why I wouldn't get to Tampa. I'd forgotten the weather was bad and was a little surprised that like Yandy Diaz and Junior Caminero didn't look better. But hitting in Minnesota when it's 40 degrees is not really good for hitting home runs at all. So moving on from that. And then on the other side for Minnesota, same thing, obviously the same shitty weather. You do have Cody Clemens probably leading off at 3,300, first base, second base eligible. Decent value. He's getting 8% ownership. Luke Keyshaw, 4,300, decent point per dollar value. But again, that's not super important in MLB DFS because of the distribution of scoring and the fact that, anybody that hits a home run is a good value play. Anybody that doesn't, unless they get 4 hits and double twice or something, they're not that good of a value play. So, I have 7% Clemens. I have 5% on Keyshaw, 4 on Wallner. There is some power here for the Twins, but mostly the hitting conditions here are absolute garbage. And I don't really want to get to it. And then finally, Baltimore taking on Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. This game will be watched probably more than any Baltimore-Pittsburgh game has in the last, my entire lifetime, with Connor Griffin making his Major League debut, starting at shortstop. On the mound, Mitch Keller going for the Pirates. Kyle Bradish is pitching for the Orioles. Bradish getting 10% ownership at 8,300. I have 9%. Keller's getting 3% ownership at 7,500. I have 1%. The matchup, I think, is better for Bradish. Bradish is certainly the better pitcher in terms of, everything, but strikeouts, not even close. Limited sample going back to last year since he missed most of the season, but a 35% strikeout percentage in, I think, 7 starts since returning last year, 3.04 xFIP. And remember, before he got hurt, this was like a top 5 Cy Young guy in the American League. Very, very good pitcher at $8,300. Baltimore's had to use their bullpen a lot too. Now they were off yesterday, so they're relatively rested. But there is, probably they're not going to, whatever plan they have for Bradish is going to be the priority for them. But there is, some incentive for it to be like, okay, if they're on the fence, all right, let's get a couple extra outs from Bradish here. They already dealt with the Zach Eflin injury. That seems like it's probably going to be like the season. So at 8,300, I do think Bradish looks pretty good. I'm right in line with the field there. For the bats, I'm not sure if we actually have Griffin projected in. I'm not sure what our lineup provider had. So this is a tricky spot where until he's officially in the lineup, he's not going to show up in most lineup provider feeds. But Connor Griffin is starting at shortstop today. So he will end up being in there. He is $3,500, probably hitting, I would guess, somewhere, around 5th or 6th, something like that. Top hitting or top prospect in baseball, 19 years old, just signed a $140 million extension. By all accounts, should be phenomenal. If you want to get to some Connor Griffin, obviously go for it. But he'll probably, whatever the correct ownership number is on him, it'll probably be a little bit higher. Remy said the lineup's out and he's batting 7th. Cool. That means we probably have him now. Let me refresh this. That's nice of them to put that out. I kind of thought they would do the Dick thing and not release it until 3 o'clock. There we go. Connor Griffin in there now, about a 6 fantasy point projection, 2% ownership. He'll be 5 probably. People are just going to want to click Connor Griffin and feel smart. But good job by DraftKings to not make him $2,000. That's usually what they end up doing with these top prospects. They get called up early in the year. It's so-and-so is 2K and kind of a free square, but not a free square because it's baseball. He at least has a real price tag here. So makes it a little bit less of a talking point. Anyway, on to the side of the game that I actually am getting to. The Orioles right now are my highest owned stack. They're getting like 5 to 10% ownership in most spots. Do we have this lineup now also? Yeah, we do not have the Orioles lineup. They have really sucked at getting lineups out so far this year. But Gunnar projected for 9% ownership along with Adley, 6 to 7% on Pete Alonso and Samuel Basallo, 5% or less to everybody else. I've talked about it with this Orioles team before already. On the one hand, they're a really appealing team to stack because you get one of the top shortstop options on any given slate in Gunnar. You get one of the top catching options in either one of Adley or Basallo in terms of power at the position. So that's really appealing because it allows you to cover two of the weakest positions. Like getting one-off shortstops isn't super appealing. Getting one-off catchers absolutely blows in general. So you cover both of those positions. You can use Pete Alonso at first base. It's very easy to keep your outfield positions open, which, is kind of the easiest spot to find high upside one-offs. The thing that sucks about the Orioles, stacking the Orioles, is that Rutschman and Basallo are both still catcher only. Eventually, one of them or both of them needs to get first base. But so far, they're catcher only. So assuming they're batting like 4 or 5, you can't stack the actual middle of the order together on DraftKings. But DraftKings has already given Kobe Mayo a third base eligibility. So that fixed at least one of the bottlenecks there. At the beginning of the year, you had Pete Alonso and Kobe Mayo at the same position as each other. You can play them together now. So at least combinatorically, you can get a little bit more flexible with the O stacks. Mitch Keller isn't a terrible pitcher, but there's not really terrible pitching on this slate. And then also, like when you factor in, that Bailey Ober is probably one of the worst pitchers on the slate, and he's pitching in Antarctica today. I like the Orioles here. They have a lot of power. 4.5 team total is, kind of just like lumped in with all these other teams behind a few, behind the Dodgers, behind the Phillies, a little bit behind the Blue Jays, but mostly it's just like neck and neck with everybody outside of the Phillies and the Dodgers. Individually, they have tons of power throughout the lineup. Like Tyler O'Neill's cheap with power. Cowser has power. Whether or not he's actually a good major league hitter, I still have no idea after how much he regressed last year, but he does still at least have power. Kobe Mayo has a ton of power and he's cheap. Both catchers have power. Taylor Ward has power. The only two guys in this lineup above 4,300 or in the projected lineup above 4,300 are Gunnar and Alonso. Obviously, you're fine paying both of those prices. And then Mitch Keller is just kind of a guy. This park isn't great for hitting home runs. It is a park downgrade from Baltimore. But going back to last season, against left-handed pitching, 183 expected ISO with just an 18% strikeout percentage for Keller, 154 expected ISO with a 22% strikeout percentage against righties. Again, it's not like you're looking at this and saying, I love taking hitters against Mitch Keller in Pittsburgh, but there just really haven't been a lot of spots on this slate that it's, outside of obviously the Phillies and Colorado, where it's just like, quote unquote, can't miss. I feel great about this. Like, Baltimore is not really getting much ownership. They've got a huge collection of just above average power hitters. And that, at least right now, subject to change clearly, but at least right now, that's where I'm making a pretty decent stand. 26% Gunnar is my highest owned guy there. But then I'm getting the 16% on Alonso, 13 on Mayo, Rutschman, 12 on Ward, 9 on Basallo, 7 on Cowser. Pretty happy getting to Baltimore. On the Pittsburgh side against Bradish, I don't think that's a spot that I'm going to want much of. 5% Cruz, 4% Lau. Obviously, like I said, I didn't have the Pittsburgh lineup when I built my lineups, but we know O'Neal Cruz gives you massive upside. He hits the ball as hard as anybody. He has massive power, steals a lot of bases, can't play center field for shit, but you don't lose points for just missing routine fly balls. Brandon Lau, very familiar, with the Orioles, playing all of his career with Tampa prior to this year. He's pretty cheap. Brian Reynolds is cheap. You have O'Hearn facing his former team. Spencer Horwitz is from Baltimore if you really want to go down the narrative route, but it's a bad matchup against Bradish. I think the strongest case that I think you could make for Pittsburgh is that if you can get into the front end of the Orioles bullpen, it is not good. The back end might be good. That kind of is up in the air. Ryan Helsley's good, but other than that, I don't know. I think Anthony Nunez is going to be good. Tyler Wells should be fine. The front end of the bullpen, though, is not good whatsoever. So if they somehow get to Bradish early, and can get him out of the game, there is plenty of add-on run upside. You saw that with Texas a couple games ago as well. I don't remember who the starting pitcher was, but whoever it was pitched fine, and then they just blew up the bullpen. I think it might have been the Eflin game actually when Eflin left early. So that would be the case for the Pirates, but I'm not getting to them. I am getting to the Orioles. Einsteinium said Michaelis is in a terrible spot. Yeah, that is very, very true. The Dodgers, like, they're one of the two teams that have a super high run total on the slate. But like, again, you kind of have to pay for them also. So behind the Dodgers and the Phillies, there's nothing that really stands out as just like this spot is can't miss. And so normally on slates like that, I end up on the Orioles, especially when they're cheap. So to recap, my highest owned pitchers right now, and again, take it for what it's worth, ran these 2 hours before lock, all subject to change. But my highest owned pitchers were Dylan Cease, Emmett Sheehan, Yuri Perez, Mackenzie Gore, and Michael King. Aaron Nola right there with King as well. Highest owned hitters overall, Shohei Ohtani, Gunnar Henderson, Victor Scott, which that is not... just ignore that one. Herrera, again, kind of can ignore, but like I do like 3,500 catcher. Jake McCarthy, Hunter Goodman, Ohtani and Henderson, obviously the ones that I feel the best about there. Highest owned stacks overall, Baltimore, St. Louis, Colorado, Dodgers, Yankees. Highest owned 5-mans, Yankees, Cardinals, Rockies, Blue Jays, Reds, Orioles. Highest owned 4-man, Orioles are number 1 there. Do I think Beavers is in the lineup? He wasn't in the projected lineup that I ran with. I don't really know. I think it's weird in the outfield. Like, Taylor Ward's going to play every day. Colton Cowser is going to play most days. And then the Tyler O'Neill, Dylan Beavers split is like, obviously O'Neill's going to face every lefty. Beavers will face, I think, most righties, but I think maybe you'll see O'Neill on days where like they're not going to give Cowser a day off, or they're not going to give anyone else a day off. Because kind of what they've done so far is, like, when Beavers plays, typically, outside of I think he missed one game, they've like O'Neill DH'd for Basayo, or Beavers played center for Cowser and O'Neill played right. They're coming off the off day today, so I'm actually genuinely curious whether they go Beavers or O'Neill and right. But the lineup that that the current projected lineup has O'Neill. Obviously, if we don't have it before lock, you can build with O'Neill and just swap to Beavers if you need to. But I think that's like a legitimate up in the air. Arcathelza said, I like the Orioles stack, but second base and third base is ugly. Yeah, I mean, second base is gross. Like, it's going to be Jeremiah Jackson or Blaze Alexander. Jackson's actually a solid hitter. Alexander's okay. Mayo, though, I mean, like, yeah, he's still a work in progress, but $2,600 guy that has like legitimate 40 home run power, you could do worse. Even if he's not a consistent hitter yet. But so that wraps this one up. Thank you for checking out the show. I will be back next week. I don't think Michaelis is ever in a good spot, but I'll be back next week. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel, thumbs up button, all of that. Good luck today on whatever slates you play. Thanks again for checking out the show. See you next week.